Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. So before we jump into our little mini comic kind of template for today, let's go ahead and take a look at a few thumbnailings, a little bit of planning, and some of my sketches that I did in my sketchbook very briefly. So don't look too closely at either my writing or my scribbles here. They're not going to make like a lot of sense just because it's almost like my brain vomit on my sketchbook where I kind of just want to throw ideas down really quickly. So I don't really care about stuff like grammar, how neat I'm kind of making everything, and the thumbnailing is very, very rough for the most part. But let's go ahead and jump back into Clip Studio Paint. So the thing I remember from last time is that I want to set my file. So I am using the comic kind of like setting in Clip Studio Paint. I'm setting my DPI to 350 and I'm changing the basic expression color to be color instead of monochromatic. That way we don't have to be stuck in grayscale or black and white and having to manually change all of our layers kind of like one by one. I changed the number of pages to be approximately 7. I wasn't too sure, so I think the last time I did a little mini comic, which happens to be, I think, XPPen Artist's little confession, I ended up doing more cleaner versions of my thumbnails on sticky notes. And because I did many more pages, I guess, of that comic, it was easier for me to use like a sticky note for 2 different pages for the comic, so it was easier for me to be able to thumbnail things with having a very clear mind of how I wanted the layout to look like for each of the pages. But today I had a little bit less planning. Part of it was because of lack of time. Apologies that this video was not uploaded yesterday on Saturday and it's uploaded today on Sunday. I had a little bit of an issue with scheduling the upload alongside with a personal matter. Basically, we had like a leak in our house and it took a lot longer to clean up and get things sorted out. So yeah, that kind of like took a chunk of my time. But for the approach that I'm taking, or I took for doing this little mini comic, I'll give you the context a little bit later, but for the most part, I ended up just sketching right onto our little comic format, and I didn't plan out our, what are they called? The paneling, I guess, for each of the pages. I decided to just freehand everything first and just try to get a feel of what I wanted the layout to be. I did, for the most part, follow closely to what I initially had at least scribbled down in my sketchbook, so I wasn't completely lost. I definitely think in the future I will do at least like cleaner thumbnails like I did for the Akemi and Sato confession little comic, just because it does give me an easier time and I don't really have to plan out too much in terms of like placement or like the composition or like framing of each different panel per page, if that makes sense. As a kind of like small heads up, the entire video is pretty much going to be like choppier footage of the process. I find that I'm very slow when it comes to just making comics in general, and I always try my best not to make things look so, I don't know how to explain it, but I tend to take a lot of shortcuts and I wish I didn't, but maybe in the future I'll do like a comic where I will focus more on actually just finishing the product up until a certain point rather than trying to film it, and we can like take a look at it in the future or something like that, so I can kind of see the direction that I want to take it. And the reason that I ended up like really trying to speedrun the comic was mostly to play around with potentially color, and I didn't really explain this at the very beginning. So the thumbnailing that I did in my sketchbook was actually supposed to be meant for like my normal style for drawing, but I ended up switching it to the chibi version just because I thought it would look cuter with simple flat colors or like doing more cell shading, which I think for some panels really worked out well, and then some other ones just look really flat and really plain and just very, I don't know, it required more detail instead of making it look so barren, I guess. But while I'm still doing the sketching, and we're going to probably shortly go into line art pretty soon, I will give you context on the little comic if you were not able to decipher from like the little snippets of the sketch alongside with my scribbles at the very beginning in my sketchbook. So I've had this little, I guess, idea of the comic already planned out like probably quite a while ago, and I think it was just in the recent weeks that I was able to kind of scribble down some sort of like text alongside with thumbnailing, the paneling and everything of Kaisen basically getting lost. Now, I've mentioned in previous videos that Kaisen is the type of character that, at least for me, I like to really like tease and just like poke fun at, so please don't think I'm bullying him. It's just like that type of character I just find fun, that they have a little bit more of like, I consider a little bit of Gat Moe, where he's more of a serious, don't mess with him kind of person. He's kind of a little deadpan at times, or just like he likes to mess around a little bit. But for the most part, he gets lost very easily. He's a little directionally challenged, I guess, in that sense, and kind of has like that cute side to him. So I thought it'd be funny to have him meet Moriko and my other OC Maseki at a little cafe to come and eat like maybe some desserts or something after lunch. And yeah, they decided to pick a very close location to his like house or apartment, and he still ended up getting lost. So that's kind of like the little premise of it, because I definitely doodled Kaisen with him being lost in general, and some people were asking like, oh, is he bad with directions, or like does he get lost often? So yeah, that's kind of just the general thing with Kaisen, as kind of like a cute little thing. At least I think it's cute for him. Let's talk about the layout again. So I ended up, after finishing my sketches, I decided to put in our borders for our pages, as well as like breaking down our panels by using the features in Clip Studio Paint. So I did zoom in to show you guys which tools I'm using for that, as well as like the way that Clip Studio Paint's tools kind of like formats your layers and folders, and we'll be kind of simplifying that later on when we start doing the coloring. But right now I moved on to line art. So line art I did pretty much with the XPPen. I have the stabilization set really high, and the reason being is that I find it a lot easier because it's kind of similar to Paint Tool Sai, and I would use, I think, the stabilization around S5 to S7. So I had it pretty high because I like having the lines really lag behind, and for me, even though the stabilization makes the lines a lot slower, I feel like it makes my inking go by a lot quicker, rather than having to redo so many lines over and over again with having less stabilization. So I'm trying my best to utilize that as much as I can, just because it's easier for me to hate my line art a little bit less if I don't have to redo it like a whole bunch. And I don't know, the consistency I really like as well, so it just kind of worked out. I was debating whether or not I was going to use the Milli pen instead, and if you don't know the difference, the Milli pen kind of has almost like no tapering, so it's like a very, if you use like Procreate, it's like the monoline brush, or just a brush that's like one width throughout the entirety of your stroke. Rather, XPPen has the ability to have thick and thin depending on your own pen pressure. So I find it fun to ink with both, to be honest, but because I was more in the mood of doing chibi work, I'll pop like a few chibis on the screen right here, because I've been working on alien stage ones, because I've been really wanting to finally tackle making some alien stage little acrylic charms, and I wanted to draw them with like these flowers that was from a, I think, previous like collaboration or whatever they Vivinos, or the company for like alien stage, had with another artist or whatever. So I wanted to do some chibis of that, and that kind of pushed me to doing kind of this comic with the chibis, as well as wanting to do them in a more cleaner-ish coloring style, which you'll see me kind of change it almost like partway through after I finished the first page, unfortunately. I think there's like two particular panels of Kaisen that are probably my favorite. So the one that I'm working on currently, I really like, as well as the one where he's like looking directly up and yelling, where even am I think is what it says. But okay, maybe I should give you a little bit of more context just about the video itself rather than the comic. So initially, because I was planning to have more time to work on this little comic video, I was planning on actually making my own font based off of my own handwriting so that I could use it for future comics. Now, I did not have time to go through that process because I wanted to do it on Procreate with a template, and when I do finally make that video and maybe make like another mini comic, I'll definitely link the videos that I've watched to make like fonts and stuff, because I want an easy way to have like consistency among my comics, but I don't really want to use like one of the default manga fonts or like the default fonts that I have, just because I don't know if I'm treating these mini comics more like personal mini projects in a way, and sometimes I want to do like more doodled styled versions where I don't mind doing like the hand lettering, but when I want to do ones that are a little bit more cleaner, like the one I'm doing today, having my own font with my own handwriting I think could be neat and speed things up. As you can see, I'm very like, I don't know, I can be neat with my handwriting when I want to be, but in general, if you saw in my sketchbook or like when I'm doing the general layout of the thumbnailing or like the sketching portion, I do have messy handwriting when I go fast, and typically like when I'm doodling and stuff, I don't really mind if it's a little bit illegible and it's not very clean, but when it comes to these, I do want things to be easier to read, and I can write fairly neat, but it does go a lot slower because I'm trying to make sure everything's clean, things are relatively the same height and width, or like the kerning between letters and words aren't like severely off or like very noticeable. But that'll be for like a future video. So let's talk about me merging my layers. So when you start using like the border tools and the paneling in Clip Studio Paint, it automatically sets, I believe, like 3-ish layers or something like that in your, like per panel. So if you have free panels like I do in the first page, each of the panels would be split into their own folders, and then within the folder you will have the outside border, I believe, a white fill with inside your panel, and then like just a blank layer. So I ended up deleting the blank layer as well as the white background on all of them, and I kept my line art alongside with the borders and merged all those together. Now, I did have an issue where I placed the text box or like the text bubbles within the panels, so I ended up having to push them outside of the folder so that they don't accidentally merge with my line art, as well as being able to crop them so that they still stay within my panel borders. So I did have to do a little bit of a workaround, but I find it a lot easier for me to work with the borders and my line art together. That way I can just easily like eyedrop as well as like bucket tool and use the selection tool to fill things in without having to have my colors basically leak out of our panels. And even though you could set like a bunch of things into a folder, set that folder as a reference layer, it's just much easier if I could do that as like one merged layer. You can see when I'm working on Moriko's hair right here, I ran into the issue of accidentally merging my speech bubble alongside with Moriko's little chibi version, but I didn't really want to like undo everything I already did, so I ended up doing like a little workaround, painting over top of my line art, redoing a line art on top to make sure it looks a little bit clean, but because I did that, her highlights are a little bit off. So just in general, when I'm working on anything on Clip Studio Paint, typically, I like to have multiple windows open. Sometimes I have Pure Ref open for my references, but because I can't like color pick or anything like that, it's mostly like for a visual board. But if I'm doing like color picking, I know you can set like a reference, or like, is it called a reference? I don't really remember. It's like similar to your navigation tool, and you can like easily eyedrop your colors. Because I don't remember what that's called, I never really used it, so I kind of like pop out at least the first page onto its own window, and then I can kind of go back and forth and color pick. Now in kind of the upper right hand-ish corner on the left side of my color wheel, I do have like my little chibi swatch set for my colors. So a lot of these are my default colors that I use for like my stickers, as well as like any designs that needs like consistency, I will drop colors into here. So everything on kind of like the bottom right hand of my swatches is kind of like for this particular comic, and there's too many colors for me to color pick from for everything. So sometimes I will pick from my color swatches, other times I will pick from my comic panels, whatever is like laying on the left hand side, because I did not put like Masaki's sweater color or his turtleneck color in, I don't think. I think there's like a few other ones that I didn't really place in, so I keep popping out the windows like this. I don't think I had Kaisen's shirt color either, so I'm using this panel as kind of like my reference and my little swatches for other colors. So in terms of the coloring method this time around, I think the previous comic that I did was more like monochromatic, and it was very much like white and pink and a little bit of like deeper, I guess like deeper pink or like very light red. This time, because we're doing more or less full color, even though I was able to keep my colors fairly consistent, I ended up switching between making the hair have like a band of shadow and kind of like these weird little bubble highlights in it, like in the hair, as well as highlighting around with, I'm using like screen and multiply. So like screen is for our highlights, multiply is used for our shadows. And I did that for both their skin, their hair, as well as like any of the color or like the background portions, anything like that. And that's pretty much it that I did for coloring. Kept it very simple, mostly shell shading, a little bit of airbrushing here and there, but I think I'm still gonna play around to see what kind of coloring method or aesthetic or look that I want to stick with in future attempts at doing more mini comics. But I will make sure to do a brief run through of all the pages at the very end if you're interested in reading the entire thing from start to finish, as well as you can see my unevenness with this particular writing, so I definitely want to do a font in the future. But let's take a look at one of my favorite panels, and I think I'll leave you guys here, and I'll see you guys next time in the next video. Bye!